everyone. I'm Anna.
And I'm Laura.
And we're youth leaders at LifeShare Church. Today we're going to be talking about a quiet heart, which is an awesome topic. We're going to be talking about what does that mean to have a quiet heart? Why is it important to practice that stillness of heart before God? What is it like to sit and listen for God's voice? And how do we have that quiet heart no matter what environment we're in? So this is a topic that when I saw it on our list of topics, I immediately looked at Laura and I asked her, I said, could you take the lead on this one? Because just to be fully transparent, this is kind of a more difficult thing for me to do. So I'm glad we're talking about this. I feel like I myself am going to receive a lot, and I hope that you guys do too. So to start off, I want to start with a question. How easy or hard is it for you to be quiet without any distractions? And then do you like silence when you're by yourself, or does it make you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, I feel like kind of naturally, sometimes it can be easy, but it's specifically hard for me when something's bothering or worrying me, which I think it is for most people.
Yeah.
If I feel like something's happened and I just have all these emotions, I will do anything I can to distract myself. Like, I will watch a movie, I'll be on my phone, I'll read a book, I'll make a billion plans. Like, I will do anything possible to just not feel how I'm feeling, which I know a lot of people do as well. Because it can sometimes just feel so overwhelming to be like, oh man, I have to actually feel these emotions and process everything that's going on in my mind right now.
Yeah.
And so usually now that I'm an adult, I realize this can only last for a little bit, like maybe a day, maybe a couple days. But then I usually know that the only way for me to break out of that spiral of whatever emotion is, it could be anxiety, it could be anger, frustration, disappointment, I know I have to sit in silence with God and process my emotions with God and to hear what he's saying and to be still, which I think is the part of having a quiet heart, is just being still and listening. And we'll talk about what that looks practically. And so even though it sounds so simple, it really is one of the hardest things that we can do, especially in our modern age, with our phones, with the distractions, with our schedules. I really think this is probably the most challenging thing that we can do as Christians.
For sure. Yeah, honestly, I already said, this is a hard topic for me. I tend to be the kind of person, I don't even have to be in a worried mood.
Yeah.
I just feel like my brain is always going. That's why, too, sometimes I have trouble sleeping. It doesn't even have to be anything is happening. I just feel like my brain is always just 1,000 miles per hour. And it's hard for me to find that quietness and stillness within me. Even sometimes with my quiet times and things like that, I will do it and it'll be really good, and then I'll get distracted pretty quickly. So again, this is a tough topic for me, but I'm glad we're talking about this because I think I'm probably not alone. All right, Laura compiled some verses about quieting our souls, so I'll go ahead and read them. The first one comes from Isaiah chapter 30, verse 15. It says, "For thus said the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. But you were unwilling." And then we have Psalm 131, verse 2. "But I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a child quieted at its mother's breast, like a child that is quieted in my soul." And then lastly, we have Psalm 37, verse 7. It says, "Be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for him to act." So obviously God has a lot to say about quieting our soul. What do you think, in your opinion, is the importance of doing that? Why is it good for us? Why is it healthy? Why is it important?
Yeah. So even from these verses, God says that we gain strength in waiting on him, and also in surrendering and humility of not feeling like we need to be out there acting and doing to make things work. When we wait on God and when we're still, it gives him the ability to work on our behalf. And it teaches us trust. It teaches us to rely on him and not on ourselves.
That's good.
And so I think that's a reason why it is so healthy and it is so important in our walk with God. And another thing that is really important to state is it's our responsibility to practice stillness. Like it says in this verse, like, in rest we will find strength, but they were unwilling to. And even David in Psalms, he said, I had to quiet my soul. So it's really our job and our responsibility to be still, to wait on God in order to gain that strength and that refreshment that God talks about in these verses. And so another thing is practicing the quiet heart and stillness is one of the hardest things we will do as Christians. Not just because, you know, we have all of our thoughts and feelings and emotions, but now in this modern age with distractions and iPhones and busy schedules, it's even harder than ever to practice a quiet and still heart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I have some tips that work for me. Maybe they don't work for everybody. So, you know, after reading these or after I read them, you can take what works for you, discard what doesn't, and just find what really helps you get into that place of stillness with God. And so the first tip that I have is to first play some music. I know for me, playing 1-2 worship songs just gets me in that mental space of really focusing on Jesus. And I think that's why we do worship first, right, in church services. So I'll do that first. And then number 2, I will put my phone away somewhere, out of reach, out of eyesight, just so I don't get distracted if someone reaches out to me. Number 3, go somewhere private, like a bedroom, a bathroom if you need to. A car is like, my car is like my safe space. I have a lot of good times with God in my car. Or just going outside, being in nature, in your backyard, somewhere private where you won't be super distracted by people. I even sometimes will go on walks too. That can be a good idea. Number 4, something I like to do is talk to God about anything that's bothering me. Any worry that I have, anxiety, maybe something that happened that's just been, you know, on my mind. And it kind of just creates a space where I can get it out of my head so I'm not focused on it. And it really releases whatever negative emotion I've been holding on to. And then number 5, and something I say that works almost every time, is to say out loud, I silence every voice that is not God's voice. Or say, I silence the enemy's voice. I silence my own voice. Jesus, please speak to me right now. And that also in the Spirit just allows God's voice to come in so much more clearer. Because it's not that God's not speaking to us, it's just that we have all these other voices that are sometimes drowning out the voice of God in our minds. Number 6, you can take deep breaths. So just breathe in, breathe out, and then just listen for the voice of God and be in the silence. And it might take some time, but I believe God will give you a feeling, a picture, a verse. Number 8, try to stay in that moment for as long as you can, to feel His love until you feel His peace and His joy, and stay in those emotions as long as you can. And the longer you stay in it, the more refreshed and just alive you will feel. Number 9, if you don't hear or feel anything, focus on a verse or maybe a word that's God has given you in the past, and just meditate on that. Can be another great way to practice His presence. And number 10, you can write down anything you felt or heard or saw, and this will just really create this practice of hearing from God, but also holding on to what He told you in your time with Him.
I love that. I really like that. I like how filled with grace your approach is. Specifically, all the things that you're doing, going into the quiet room and things like that. I feel like that's just really setting yourself up for success. And sometimes I know I've tried at times to quiet my heart, and then I won't do it the full way, and then it won't happen, and I'll get discouraged. But these are some really great tips. I also really liked what you said about if you're not hearing something in the moment, don't be discouraged, because I feel like that's been me too. But you say, oh yeah, well, there's always the Word of God. You can always go back to the Bible, meditate on that, something He said in the past, it's still true. That's really good. I really enjoy that. So one of the things that I feel like people struggle with in entering this quiet space is differentiating what the voice of God sounds like. Because you mentioned this, a lot of times in our day-to-day, there's so much going on in our minds. I know this is for me especially, but that, you know, we have our voice, we have sometimes the enemy's voice, the world's voice, whatever it is. How can we know when it's God's voice?
Yeah, so kind of what I do and what we have taught here at Life Share is if it's a voice that feels and sounds like a fruit of the Spirit, if it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, etc., then it is the voice of God. And if it doesn't fit one of those categories or any of those categories, it's probably not God's voice.
Right.
And so that's a really good metric because the devil loves to try to, what's the word? He tries to get us to think that he's God's voice. But an easy way to figure out if it is God's voice or the enemy's voice is what I just said. Is it a fruit of the Spirit? And if it is, then it's probably God.
That's really good. I think that's important because sometimes when we're in that space, it can be vulnerable. We're just hearing for whatever. And sometimes we get confused. Like, we'll hear something that's condemnation or shame, and we think, oh, that's God condemning me.
Yeah.
But I love what you said, too, in your tips, that we can say, I silence every other voice that's not God. So if there's shame or condemnation or something that's not of God, we're allowed to shut that down, right, in that time. And that's really empowering. That's very freeing to know. So that's awesome. Well, I think a lot of us want to get to this space of quietness and stillness before God, and we want to hear what he has to say, but a lot of times it feels like there's so many things pulling us away from it. Every time we say, oh, we want to go spend time with God, there's always something that comes and takes up our time. So in your opinion, what do you think it is that keeps us from spending that time with God and having that stillness in our heart?
Right. I know for me, and I've heard a lot of people say it's like, oh, I just don't have the time. But then we'll have time for things that, you know, aren't necessary, that could be entertainment or whatever. And so, and I'm very guilty of this too. And so I've realized, I'm like, am I really just not, am I really busy? Or maybe I just don't think God's going to speak to me. Maybe there's guilt or there's shame, or I just, at the end of the day, don't want to deal with the negative emotions that I know I'm going to have to face when I decide to be still. And so an important thing to remember in all of this is that we're not doing this to get God to come close to us. Like, God is already with us.
That's good.
He lives inside of us, that he's around us, that we're in him. And the whole point of stillness in the quiet heart is just to focus on him, to give him our attention. Just like you can be in the room with someone, right next to them even, and if you're not talking, if you're not making eye contact, you won't feel connected to them, even though they're there.
Right.
And so the whole point of this is really just to connect to God and to feel his emotions and his heart in us, and that is the most important thing in all of this. And so the cool thing about the quiet heart and stillness is, while we can practice it in these kind of set amount of times, like I've mentioned, when we start doing that more and more, we can actually learn to practice stillness in any environment. At school, at work, with our families, when we're in the midst of craziness, which I think is sometimes when we need the stillness the most.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not when like there's no one around us and it's all quiet. It's like in the moment of like the chaos that we need the peace.
Right.
And I really think if we practice this in set amount of times, it's just easier to tap into it on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis. And quieting our soul is called the secret place. It's where God gives us direction. It's where God reminds us of our identity. It's where we can really feel the most connected to him, I think. And if it's hard for you, if this is a struggle, don't be discouraged. Like I said, this is one of the hardest things we can practice in our walk with God. But as we practice it, you're going to crave it more and more and more. I know that's how it has been for me, kind of like working out. Like the more you do it, the more usually happens that you kind of just crave it. Your body craves it. And with all this said, I'm definitely not telling you to stop going to school or to work or to get off your phone or to do all the things you like to do.
Right.
Because that's just not realistic.
Right.
Instead, it's just how can you schedule your time to just make a certain slot where you can just practice the stillness and practice the quiet. And so I would encourage anyone listening to look at your weekly schedule, look at your weekend schedule, and see what time during the day is the best for you to practice that stillness. Maybe it's like 15 minutes before you clock into your shift at work. Maybe it's just in the mornings, or maybe even in the evenings. However that looks for you, I would challenge you to look at that and see what will work for you this next week. And I really believe that you'll just be so encouraged and so refreshed as you practice stillness.
That's awesome.